Hello and welcome back to Joel Explores Tech. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a collection of PCs that I recently picked up off Facebook Marketplace. There's a total of 10 towers that were included, as well as a number of CRTs. In this video, I'll be focusing on the towers themselves. They range from 486s all the way up to Pentium 4, as well as a Dell system that's a bit newer that has a Xeon in there. But I'll be bringing each system up on the bench, opening them up, taking a look at what's inside, hoping for some interesting cards in there. And for the systems that have a drive, we'll see if they boot and do a little exploring. I'm going to run through the systems in relatively chronological order. This is the first one I grabbed. It is a kind of a mid-tower here with probably early Pentium. It's got a case badge for Kim. And we have Intel inside. We have a speed indicator. We've got a fake 3.5-inch drive cover here, a real 3.5-inch drive. We have a 5 1/4 and a CD-ROM. Everything is very dirty. You can see the 5 1/4 drive is almost entirely caked with dust, I assume from airflow being sucked in through the drive there. They have a B and A label for the two drives, and they have a sticker here, B is disabled in BIOS and Windows. On the back, we've got the keys attached, which is a relatively rare find for these old machines. Not that you ever really end up using the keys all that often, but it's kind of cool to have that on there. The label is Computer Technology Link Corporation from Oregon. I looked it up, and they were founded in Beaverton in 1989. The serial number is actually handwritten on here. It's a little worn off though. And we have a safety inspection sticker from the state of Oregon. We have a video card and a card for I/O with the parallel and serial ports and a AT keyboard connector. Let's go ahead and get this opened up and take a look on the inside. Okay, so we've got 8 30-pin SIM slots that are populated. So this might not actually be a Pentium. Ooh, we've got a Varta battery in here. So we actually have a floppy controller card. Let's get this popped out. So this might actually be an earlier system. I'd assumed this was a Pentium from the Intel Inside sticker on the front. So floppy controller card. Pretty much no branding from what I can see. So there's no hard drive in the system. We have our IDE cable here. And this was, so one of the floppies was on the, oh, you know what? This was a CD-ROM card, actually. I don't think I've run across, I know some of the earlier CD-ROM cards had their own interface, but this looks like more like a floppy style. I have to count the pinout, but you know, so comparing the CD-ROM cable they're using with the standard IDE. So that is a interesting find. So Western Digital. I'll have to look up the specs, but VLB 35B version 1. Nothing particularly identifying on the back here, but possibly some numbers we can Google. So likely a 486 machine, I'm thinking, that we're looking at here. Let's pop out our serial I/O card here. So we've got our IDE, which probably was obviously their hard drive. A UMC chipset. We've got game port on here as well. A second COM port. Interesting. Intel Overdrive socket 2. There we go. Alright, so they've got a thermal pad on there. There we go. The fabled 46 DX266. Okay, so it looks like the backplane that the motherboard is mounted on is not removable. So in order to get that motherboard out, I think we need to next is pop off the floppy tray here. Now let's just see what screws we have holding this thing in place. Okay, so I see one screw, actually two, and then we can inspect that Varda battery there, which definitely seeing some rust. Let's hope the board is intact. So now we can see the Varda battery here. Let's see if we can get a little close-up of that. There's definitely some corrosion there. So I'm going to go ahead and heat up the soldering iron and get that off of there. Luckily, I think we're good on the traces on the board. I'm not seeing anything that would indicate any issues yet. So let's go ahead and get that off there. All right, you have to excuse my AC has just come on, but I think that looks good. I'm not seeing any signs of damage there. I think we got it off in time. Actually doesn't look too bad now, but definitely not something you want to leave on those old systems. So I'm going to go ahead and get all this blown out, clean everything up, and then maybe we'll do some testing. So I fully disassembled the system and cleaned pretty much all the components, even taking off the front faceplate of the case, cleaning behind there, the drives, blowing everything out. I think we got it all pretty clean. I thought I would kind of just summarize what we have here before we put everything back together. So the floppy drive is a Panasonic JU257A604P. The 5 1/4, we've got a Panasonic drive as well, JU475-5. The motherboard itself was a Galaxy V3, so we've got 8 ISA slots, 2 VLB. We have a Intel Overdrive socket 2. We have a VLB controller card. Again, this was what we were using for the floppy and IDE, as well as the printer and COM port. There was the controller card for the CD-ROM with the interesting smaller floppy width connector. The CD-ROM drive itself is a Sony. And again, we've got that smaller connector, this sub-IF, which I haven't seen before. I'll have to do some reading up on that. Our standard power connector. We've got an audio breakout and a grounding connector. And then the last thing was, of course, that VLB video card. I did a little bit of reading up on this. It should be a pretty good card for Windows graphic acceleration in earlier Windows 3.1. I've reinstalled everything in the system. We've got our video card, our floppy and IDE controller card in the bottom. So we've got the two VLB cards, our CD-ROM controller card, and I think everything else is pretty much ready to go for our first test. I did do a test of the power supply before doing this first power-up test, and the ATOP power supply that was in the system would not turn on. I was doing some testing with my multimeter, just standalone, tried it with a load on there, and just wouldn't power up for me, so I'll have to look into that later. For now, I've swapped in a Nlight power supply, basically the same setup. So let's go ahead and give it a try. I've got the VGA routed out to the monitor over here, so we'll see if we get any picture. I do have the GoTech hooked up. All right, that looks good. So let's go ahead and go into, okay, 128 of cache. Let's go ahead and straighten this out, give you guys a better view. Not a lot to see because our speed indicator is not powered up right now. Let me reboot and let's check out the BIOS. Okay, looks like the same or very similar AMI BIOS to the other 46 machine I have. Let's go ahead and get the Gotek configured. I've got the Gotek just in here as a temporary way to easily get some different boot disk options. As this video is just a kind of a quick test of the machines, I just wanted to be able to kind of boot up and confirm the functionality of everything. Alright, so we just need that. And then I believe the disk image 2 is what I want for boot up. Let's give that a try. Got the light at least on the Gotek there. And there we go. Okay, Windows 95 boot disk. We'll do no CD-ROM support for now. Actually, I probably could have just booted from the benchmark disk I was going to use. I've got Phil from Phil's Computer Lab benchmarks here. The system definitely feels a bit slower. I don't know if it's the current configuration. Let's go ahead and do a quick speed test here and see what we get. Okay, so we do have our 8 megs of memory. We're seeing that Western Digital video card. Looks like it has 1 meg of video memory on there now. And we did see that it had the second bank that we could upgrade. Okay, so we're showing a 46DX250, whereas we know the CPU is a 66. So we'll have to look into the config in the BIOS, or possibly something on the motherboard. Let's do one quick check in the BIOS, and then we'll probably just move on to the next machine. Let's just see if we see any settings. Memory test. System boots. Okay, so external cache is enabled. Here we go. CPU frequency. So we're at 50, 40, 16-33. So that would probably be with the turbo. 25, 20, 50. So there's no 60. Interesting. I'll have to look up the motherboard manual for this online and see if there's either jumper settings or possibly a BIOS update required to enable 66 megahertz. So I think that wraps up this machine for now. As you can see, it cleaned up quite nicely. Very little yellowing on the parts here, and maybe in the future we'll do more of a test with that old CD-ROM drive and confirm the functionality of these floppy drives. So this next machine in the collection that was from the early 90s or late 80s was this crazy tower setup here. We've got a 120 megabyte tape drive. We've got 3.5 floppy, 5 1/4, and then this really cool control panel up here with a big chunky switch. We've got our power lock. We've got reset and turbo, a speed display, an indicator for 0 weight, and a case badge. I believe this is probably a clock. I haven't tested the system yet, so I don't know, but that's what I would think there. It looks to me that there was probably a door at some point on here. You can see the latching mechanism here that would have latched the door in place. But sadly that is gone. It's a all metal case. I've got plenty of spots here for cereal. We've got, let's see, what looks to be a sound card with a volume knob. That's a good sign that maybe a Sound Blaster card. Again here, label for Datel Systems, or Datel, which matches the case badge on the front, assembled on 12491. The system is now directly on the desk. I've rotated out the feet just to kind of show how that works. Let's just use the back feet here. So they do move independently. So when this foot moves, it is geared so that the other one moves in unison. And the same with the front. The sides come off from the bottom, I believe. Quite violent there, but we have the side off. So there's two latches that hold on at the bottom. So we can see quite a lot of space here for drives. Got our 5 1/4 and this giant power supply. That's kind of crazy. Hopefully this thing works, because I mean, I guess it is a standard output, but the form factor is quite large. It looks to be a socket 7 board. We've got a, can't tell the CPU quite yet. Okay, so we do have a genuine creative card, a CT350B, or no, CT1350B. Okay, let's get this video card out. So we have an ATI Mach 64 PCI card from 1995. So this is obviously a newer edition, probably, as the system was assembled in 91. So we've got 4 PCI slots, 4 ISA. Let's go ahead and pop the CPU out. Slides out, and we have a Intel Pentium 120, it looks like, from 92 or 93. Okay, well, let me go ahead and do a little bit of cleaning, and then we'll go ahead and test this system. After doing a bit of Googling on the sound card from this system, this is a Sound Blaster 2.0. It is the 1350B revision 4. These were made as an alternative to the Sound Blaster Pro when that was released. This is indeed a OPL2 chip. It just has a sticker placed on the top. Another item to watch out for on these old systems as you're cleaning and taking things apart, and before you do testing, is to never take for granted the way things are hooked up. The power connectors on this board were actually hooked up with the ground leads on the outside on the board, which is incorrect and could possibly damage the board. These older style connectors should always be placed with the ground pins in the center. So again, as you're confirming everything before you power it on, make sure to kind of run down a checklist and confirm everything. But I'm glad I caught that before powering the system up. I've hooked up the board and have everything hooked up and ready to test. I wanted to do a quick test outside of putting everything back in the case. So I do have the GoTech hooked up, and we have power, the VGA keyboard hooked up. So let's go ahead and give it a power up and see what we get. And there we go. We have a boot. Interesting. Okay, so we have a much later BIOS than the 486 one from the previous machine. So I'm going to go through some of the basic stuff here. All right, let's go ahead and just do a quick config on the floppy and give it a boot. So 16 megs of RAM. So we've got two 8 meg sticks in there. So it doesn't look like we're seeking the floppy drive. Oh no, we did. Okay. 256 cache, 120 megahertz CPU, which is what we saw. Oh, our CPU fan is not going. Let me go ahead and shut us down here. So after the quick smoke test with the motherboard mounted outside the case, I went ahead and mounted it back inside. Again, for this video, I'm just kind of doing a quick run through and testing of the system's posting and checking out the inside. So now I just want to do one more test with the system with the Gotek, just kind of do a quick benchmark. So let's go ahead and power it up. You can probably see a little bit that I cleaned out the outside and the inside of the case a bit. It was kind of just caked with dirt and dust in the bottom there. Let's go for this. And again, I'm just booting off the Gotek. And then we're just going to run the speed sys like we did on the other system. Just to give us a quick kind of look at the speed of the system here. Okay, so about what we'd expect. You can see Pentium 133 just a little bit ahead of this. We're at 87.31 with this being a Pentium 120. So I think this system looks pretty good for now. Again, just wanted to kind of give it a quick run through. I'm not going to test the drives on all the systems. I've got plenty of drives. I could always swap them out if they aren't working for some reason, if I do want to utilize this system. So let's go ahead and move on to the third system. Next up, we have another of these monstrous towers, full height. This one again is badged with the KIM case badge and is from CTL Computer Technology Link Corporation from Portland. We've got our Intel Inside badge, our standard power, reset, and turbo. We have a 5 1/4 floppy drive. Nothing else is installed. Again, this case is pretty dirty. We come around to the back. Again, we've got our CTL badge. We have a handwritten model number as Pentium 90, so at least originally this was a Pentium 90. We have a variety of different ports. We've got a COM1 9-pin, a COM2 a game port, joystick, game port as well on, it looks like a sound card with the volume knob, so maybe that's a Sound Blaster. We've got two LPTs and a video port, and again our AT style keyboard connector. Because this case is so tall, I decided I would just quickly show the top here where we've got our drive cages and our power supply. So taking a look at the bottom half of the case, we've got a drive cage with two hard drives. We've got a Sound Blaster CT 1750, so a Sound Blaster 16. That's a nice find. We've got a VGA card of some sort here that we'll be able to identify in a minute. There are a number of I/O cards. I believe this is the IDE controller going up to the hard drives here. Looks like this one here is what's going up to our floppies. And there's another card down at the bottom that is some serial and a second LPT port. Let's go ahead and get some of these out of here and take a look. So here's our first card, the IDE controller. Looks like we have space for an EEPROM and two IDE ports. Fairly simple setup here, but this motherboard looks like it doesn't have floppy or IDE support. And next up we have our video card, an ATI Mach 64. So very similar to the previous card that we had in the other system. Kind of an interesting memory arrangement here with these, I believe they're called SIP, single inline memory package. I can already see some potential issues on the battery here. We'll have to pop that one out like we did on the other system. And it is absolutely caked with oh, that is a bad sign. We've got some corrosion on our floppy controller here. Next up we have our Sound Blaster card. One thing I forgot to mention at the top half, there's no CD-ROM installed in this system, but I do see a cable hooked up to the Panasonic connector on the Sound Blaster card and a cable running up there, as well as an audio line. Sound Blaster 16 MCD with a CT1750 model number. Overall, mostly just dusty. I'm not seeing any corrosion, so I think we might be all right. This tiny card with some additional parallel and COM port. Not seeing any obvious branding outside of the SIIG, Fremont, California, and then some jumpers here for configuring your ports. So now I've got the cables unhooked. It's actually a really nice feature having this swing out drive bay. Allows you easy access to the motherboard. That actually lifts out of place. So we've got the drives out of the cage. This is the Seagate ST31220A. Looks like it is configured for master and 1 gigabyte, it looks like. Then we have a Fujitsu drive, model M1614TAU. I don't see any obvious indication of the size, but this one was set up for cable select. The motherboard itself is a Galaxy 5. There's a spot for revision, but I don't see any revision indicated there. Let's see if we can pop out the CPU. So the CPU is in a socket 5 slot there, and Intel 9293. I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like a Pentium 90. Let me pop this out here. So no, oh no, there is ICOMP index 735 80502-90. So again, probably a 90, Pentium 90. So let me go ahead and get the rest of the board out of here and get everything cleaned up, and then we'll do a quick test on this system. So before I clean things up further and remove the battery, I just wanted to note some of the issues that I saw that had come from this battery leakage. First off, you can see the obviously leakage and corrosion here. There's a couple on the legs of these transistors down here, a little bit on this controller chip right here, and then the two cards which were below the battery. We have our video card. I hadn't noticed this earlier, but there is a little bit of corrosion on the pins closest to where the battery would have been. It's kind of odd. I guess they could have dripped onto here and then maybe ran over. I don't know. In any case, there's a little bit right there. All the other cards look fine except for the floppy controller, which had quite a bit, and it was sitting right here, I believe. So it would have been right in the path of that leakage. So we'll give everything a clean up. But I thought I would just show that before I started in on getting it cleaned off. I've cleaned up the system a bit and reinstalled the motherboard and the video card. I was doing some preliminary testing and was running into some issues getting the floppy and the IDE controllers working. So for now I've dropped in a VLB controller just with the Gotek. I was not able to get the drives to read. I might need to do some further troubleshooting there. But just to do a quick test, I'm going to go ahead and boot it up with the Gotek. You can see I've got the postcard in there. I was having issues getting the system to even post with various cards installed. Finally was able to get the sockets cleaned out where we had seen some of that corrosion from the battery, and got everything booting at least where it is. So let's run the DOS bench again here, and we'll do SpeedSys just so we can kind of compare the two systems. So this should be a Pentium 90. The previous one we looked at was the 120. All three of the systems we've looked at so far had the year 2000 bug, which is kind of to be expected given the time frame they were released. So there we go, 66.19. I believe the other one was in the mid 80s. And sort of the same cache fall off, though this looks to be quite a bit slower, where we were at 8 and 256 for the different cache levels there. After cleaning the sound card, there were a few things I'm semi-worried about, but I'm going to do some testing later, so that won't be in this video. There's a few of the places where you can see some kind of corrosion buildup on some of the pins. I've already given it a little bit of a scrub. Hopefully it'll just work, but I'm not holding out hope that we'll be able to save this one, but we'll see how it goes after some further cleaning. I might do another video later with looking at some of these sound cards and running through them. But this is, again, the CT1750 Sound Blaster 16. Should be a pretty nice card if we can get it working. So I think that wraps it up for the initial look at this machine. We've done kind of a basic clean and test, confirmed that at least the system posts and the CPU, memory, and video card are working. This machine was the last of the pre-Pentium 2. We had the 46 and 2 Pentium 1s. So I think I'm going to cut the video at this point, and we'll throw the remaining machines into another video at a later date, where we'll look at the Pentium 2, Pentium 3, and Pentium 4 systems. Those probably will be a little bit quicker. Hopefully wouldn't require quite as much troubleshooting. A lot of the older systems tend to have more corrosion and issues, unless we get into some of the capacitor plague issues of the early and mid 2000s. So I think that wraps it up for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.